Hey everyone, we are so excited to have you here today for episode 2 of Hall Hutch. It's us, and we're talking to the amazing Brad Hooks, and he's going to share with us his journey on neurodiversity as a leader and how it has shaped him. And I'm going to hand over to you now, Brad, to tell us your story. We're so excited to have you here today.
Oh, well, thank you both so much for having me. It's a privilege and a pleasure to connect. In terms of my story, interesting, I grew up in South Africa, and I suppose there was a little bit of trauma in the early years, as so many people have, that created hypervigilance that led to me being always on high alert for things that may or may not go wrong. Common pattern, I believe, with ADHD and similar conditions. I was always told that I was a daydreamer at school, but was always highly creative. If I found something that interested me, I could disappear for hours, days, weeks doing that thing. But I guess I didn't find that many things where I could settle in and really master them to the level that I would have liked to. So remained creative, but across lots of different pursuits. Really just couldn't wait to be an adult, to get out of there and go somewhere new, which is exactly what I did. So I found my way to the UK, worked in big corporates, and I suppose the neurodiverse brain enables you to do superhuman things because I was able to, for example, learn web coding. I hadn't been very good at maths, primarily because teachers had told me I wasn't good at it. So you stop trying in a way. If it's not encouraged, I found that I would just give up quite relatively easy, especially in the context of a very old school traditional education where if you did something wrong, you would get caned for it. I mean, there was still I got caned so much at school and or to the point where I just found it amusing. I find it like, oh, these old men like to hit young boys. Strange. Interesting. Mm. Yeah, absolutely. And so I decided that I was going to make my way overseas. I must say that I did find some activities that really did help me get into flow state. And that was surfing. Surfing was my respite. It was my happy place. It was a mastery of new skills, a completely uncertain environment. Every day is different, every wave is different, so you're constantly dealing with lots of variables, and I loved that. And then writing was a safe place where I could just express thoughts and go deep into this rich inner world that I always had. I always felt way more comfortable in my inner world that was part fantasy, part learning, part exploration, than in the outer world, which is I only realized that relatively recently. And then of course things like photography. So I studied photography and I got really good at it. I was published long before the course ever finished. And then off I went to the UK with a surfboard and a tiny little suitcase, and discovered that I wasn't going to be doing much surfing in London, but I had it there just in case. Started working for some big corporations and progressed up the ladder really fast because I could, as I said, learn things like computer coding, which I thought I was bad at maths. How could I learn computer programming? I thought I was a writer, and aren't those two things incompatible? But really, at the end of the day, it's logic and language. So managed to progress rapidly up the ranks, but I would always find myself at a certain point becoming bored, becoming disengaged, like, wow, is this all there is to what I'm doing? And so I experimented with these different career paths, could have gone in any direction. Some of the companies were offering, really good salaries to stick around, but I didn't want to do that. I wanted to go surfing. So I left, moved to Australia, and that was fantastic. Found myself living on Manly Beach in Sydney, and I kind of decided I did not want to work I'd done my stint in my very early 20s within big corporates. I was like, I actually don't want to go back there. I want to write books, primarily fiction novels. And what could I do in order to not have to go and work for a big corporate to earn cash? So I thought, well, I've developed these web skills. I'll start a digital agency. And that took off. Now, it wasn't always easy because with this attention deficit disorder, I found myself always distracted, always everything was always last minute. The trigger to get anything done was extreme urgency, kind of like the urgency of this project needs to be launched today at 2 p.m. and I haven't started yet. And then I'd achieve superhuman things. I'd be able to deep dive into code and just create something incredible in a really short amount of time. And I always wished that I didn't have to operate in that way. So it wasn't always so last minute, that it wasn't always desperation. Yet I accepted this is who I am and I can achieve superhuman things. And did. And I created platforms and apps and tools for huge brands in Australia, but burnt myself out because I didn't know the importance of balancing performance with recovery. And so it was all party.
Also, sorry to interrupt, that you were living off
Please.
the nervous system because
100%.
understand that. That's what we do. Our brains navigate towards it because the adrenaline feels amazing.
Yeah. And I think that feeling of stress was something I'd experienced my entire life. So I kept going back to it because it was a comfortable state. So my nervous system was conditioned to be in this high adrenaline, high cortisol state. And if I wasn't there, something was actually wrong. I mean, it's only in retrospect that I realize, oh, I was just conditioned to this feeling of hyper arousal. And anything that challenged that it created discomfort. So I would recreate it, even if it wasn't necessary. And that led me on a path to, revelry and partying and pushing myself. I mean, going and surfing big waves, that was fun. Pushing myself in work, not sleeping, and eventually you have a massive crash. So I decided to pack up the digital agency. I mean, on paper, it was a dream. I even had a startup that was starting to get some real momentum. I'd invented the world's first carbon offsetting system for websites. Like how much carbon does a website create? And I realized that the internet was contributing massively to carbon levels around the world. So came up with an algorithm and, created this whole thing. Investors bought in. They told me to get a haircut, which I didn't like. And then, eventually I booked myself a one-way ticket overseas. And I went on this journey to interview people who had achieved what I thought was sustainable high performance. And I'd always been interested in personal development. I just spent a decade working with a company called Life by Design, where I learned a lot about positive psychology and neuroscience. And we built these platforms that ended up being used by lots of huge companies. And I continued to be a digital nomad consulting for Life by Design. And a lot of what I learned there and translated into digital tools and technology started sinking in. And I started practicing it on this journey of about over 3 years traveling around the world, just interviewing people, practicing. I spent time with monks in Nepal. I spent time with kung fu masters in Vietnam, with magicians in India. Just went on adventures and funded myself, much like Tim Ferriss talks about in his book, the 4-hour work week. I really did that. I could work 4 hours per week and the rest of the time use for self-development and research and videography and photography and writing. So that's when I wrote my first book. And I eventually, several years later, after this incredible adventure, I met my future partner in Bali. And then we moved to New Zealand, where I got back into the wellbeing industry with Resilience Institute and really started turning some of these principles into tools that I could teach. So I started running workshops, and I liked their holistic framework based around the resilience spiral developed by Dr. Sven, and really reinvented a lot of their tools and tried to simplify and growth hack the organization to become a much more of a global player, which it did. And along the way, developed many more tools using my own approaches, published quite a few books. Resilience Mastery was published in 2020. Start with Values was published by Penguin in 2025. And I've got another one coming next year. I suppose the thread is, along the way, I realized that I could focus, especially if it was something that I was passionate about, if I had a sense of, well, this is purposeful. And that's where the idea of Start with Values very much came from. It's, if I'm clear about what matters to me, can I act in alignment with those values in order to focus my attention instead of just being distracted, instead of finding myself drawn according to other people's values and being a people pleaser, which I definitely was. I didn't know where to put boundaries in place. I'd always say yes, and then I'd figure out ways to do it, often at the expense of my own well-being.
Yeah.
I experimented with some medication like modafinil, which I'd heard was the limitless drug. And this was about a decade ago. And what that did is it taught me that I could focus. I mean, you go into this tunnel vision and it was like, oh, this is what normal people feel like. Amazing. And I could do it, but I could do it with admin. I could do it with emails. I could do it with meetings. I could do it with whatever. But I found that just having experienced the fact that it was possible trained me in order to be able to do it more regularly. And now I'm able to, focus on demand. Of course, it helps a lot more if it's something that I'm interested in, or at least find the why, the meaning behind whatever I'm doing, which helps to stay focused.
I think that the medication is really useful to use for a period of time when you want to understand how to operate in a neurotypical world. And so it's great for things like admin. It's great for things when you need to be in back-to-back meetings, or you've got to do chunks of work that do require consistent focus. And maybe those areas are not things that take you into flow or align to your passion or your values. And I know that Gay Mate, for example, when he started writing his books, he had to take Ritalin in order to do that. And even just discovering that gave me great permission to understand it better. But hearing your story, I really correlate to what you're saying about the Resilience Institute, because it was when I started working with Dr. Sven Hansen as well, having masked my ADHD all of my career up until recently, that I realized that a lot of the Resilience Institute's work was aligned to the things that I'd learned to do, like getting out of my sympathetic nervous system, understanding my relationship with risk and how that took me into a bad place unless I was taking healthy risks. And, snowboarding was great, but retail therapy, not so great, although it's really hard to deal with an issue when you look great as a result of it. But, like those simple things, and empathy and boundaries, and all these things have informed the program that I've been putting together and building that also aligns with what you're doing in your values program, because I think actually I point everyone towards your book that goes through my program, because it's such a powerful, insightful book, and it really helps people work out where flow is for them. And understanding the neuroscience of flow combined with it starts with values is actually a perfect combo. But when you look back, what would you tell your young self now if you could?
That's an exercise I actually perform regularly. It's interesting. I was thinking about this over the weekend, and I often reflect forward and ask that question, what would the future version of me say to me right now? And then I do the same for the past version. It's always about a decade away. If I could go back, I would say to the mid to late 30s version of myself, just don't worry about things so much. All of this time spent in future-based thinking, worry, anxiety, there's really no point. Just stay present, and you'll be way more open to the opportunities that are there. You'll be able to apply your attention. So I think that's it. And if I could go back another couple of decades, it would just be the same advice. All of that future-based thinking, all of that hypervigilance, it's a survival strategy, and you've become conditioned to it. However, I'm also compassionate towards that version of myself, because it's the same version that picked up a book called The Buddha's Brain when I was 25 and read about meditation for the first time, and the elephant and the rider, and that there is this huge emotional turmoil that everyone experiences, but you can direct it in some ways with practice. So I was always on the lookout for ways to improve, even though I could have expedited that process. But at the same time, don't worry, don't stress as much. Try to break the habit of stress.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it's a great piece of advice to your younger self and hopefully to our audience as well, because I think, what we're wanting to do is break down the stigma associated with neurodiversity. We really want to share stories like yours that give hope and meaning and purpose, but also dispel some of the myths around it. And, you have been able to shape your life to fit with the architecture of your brain, like so many captains of industry have done. They are immensely successful because they've managed to do that. They've managed to set up their own worlds and by honouring their entrepreneurship. But many don't manage to do that. And so this whole podcast series is about hearing other people's stories. What would be the one piece of advice that you would want to give our audience?
I think to believe in yourself, trust yourself. We often don't. We have a lot of doubt. People experience imposter syndrome. They think, well, that's for other people. Whereas the reality is anything is possible, especially if your brain operates in different ways, unusual ways, because there are more than enough people whose brains work normally and they can apply their focus and get things done. But it's those who trust their weirdness, trust their creativity, trust their ability to connect the dots. I mean, that is what I'm best at doing, is synthesizing information and connecting dots that other people don't see. So use that as your superpower and just believe in yourself. Paint a picture of what the future version of you might look like, and then just see, well, what dots might need to connect to get there. Use your superpowers to get there.
Yeah, I think you did right. And accepting who you are for what you are. I remember years ago, 20 years ago, hearing a talk by Dr. Rita Moore, who was the first Maori woman psychiatrist. In fact, she wasn't. She actually delved into psychiatry. She was the first female GP who then dabbled into psychiatry. And she was retiring. And the radio reporter was asking her to define madness. And she obviously thought it was a naff question. And she said, well, there's lots of different forms of mental disorder. That, for example, you could take, say, Vincent van Gogh in the sense of, say, bipolar disorder or whatever condition he had, which she took to mean extremes of emotion beyond the range of normal people. And that really stuck with me. And I didn't quite know what to do with it till probably about 20 years ago. And having worked in advertising, I found that I was surrounded by people who thought differently, who had extremes of emotion. And I'm sure that one of the side effects of neurodiversity is the intensity of the emotions which you feel, and you can't measure it. It's like saying, do you love your children more than I love my children? Well, there's no way of measuring it. But you do know that you feel an intensity towards some people or some things. And I think all you can do is go with it. And the more you fight against it, the more you're trapped in the cycle of unhappiness or discomfort, because you know you're not where you should be. And
often I think too, Hutch, that the when it's a big emotion and we're dealing with it, the fear of sinking into that emotion is worse than actually allowing yourself to sink into the emotion. So we almost had this hesitancy to go there, but actually when we do and we realize that, oh gosh, what is that? And why am I feeling so strongly? And we stop and pay attention to it instead of pushing it down, that actually we can understand it. And in that terrain is a rich territory of self-awareness that I do think that is quite unique to neurodiversity. We had a different relationship with our emotions. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, Brad.
Well, absolutely. The emotional experiences were always so overwhelming. That's what I found in my own life. Just so extreme, whether it was the frustration or the anger, just all encompassing, or the sadness was, I never got diagnosed, but I would have been clinically depressed for years in my mid to late 20s. Just these extremes. And I remember getting to India, and I was in my little jungle hut in Goa, and I'd been there for about 4 days, and I got really angry about something. And I realized no one cares. I'm in India. I can be as angry as I want, but actually no one cares. And it was this great relief because I thought, well, no one's going to feel sympathy for me. You're in a jungle hut. And does it matter? And that was the first time I disconnected from the emotional experience. I went, oh, that's just an emotion. That's not me.
Yeah.
That's just a sensation that I'm experiencing. It's a signal that something's wrong. And I started asking, well, is the intensity of that signal worth it? Is that helpful? And in my own weird way, I discovered affect labeling. So being able to name an emotional state in order to shift, down-regulate it, or diffuse the intensity. And that was an incredible tool. And it's stuck with me ever since. Just being able to go, oh, Brad is experiencing annoyance. How interesting. But with a bit of compassion as well. Like, oh yeah, there was a trigger there. So of course, you're running late for a meeting. Oh, Brad's feeling a little bit of this frustration with the driver and problem. It's not that driver's fault. And being able to step back made a big difference for me.
I've been following a really interesting thought leader and a neuroscientist, Dr. Judith Orloff, and she works in Silicon Valley now around emotional intelligence and also around working with empaths. So she calls it empaths or highly sensitive people. And I remember being told when I was younger that I was a highly sensitive person because I would pick up on what was going on. And I'm thinking of this. I was at a beautiful, intimate family wedding on the weekend on Saturday, and it was so emotional. The young woman getting married, actually, she is ADHD, and it was so powerful and beautiful that there wasn't a dry eye out there in the garden and on Scenic Drive, looking out over the city. Everyone had tears streaming down their face, but it was beautiful, and so we were all engaging our mirror neurons. And I've been researching mirror neurons and neurodiversity, and I think that those that identify as ADHD tend to have a higher number of mirror neurons. And so what we do is we pick up on other people's big emotions really easily. And understanding that is a really powerful journey. I can remember my son having this experience because it was his diagnosis that made me look and go, oh, gosh, that's probably me. And he would pick up on someone's emotion who was like, across the other side of the room, and it would hijack his frontal lobe and ability to focus and hijack because he was so high on empathy that he didn't like it when someone was being bullied or didn't like it when someone was being controlled by someone else. He would react really strongly. Do you identify with that at all, Brad?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I was so sensitive all of my life to people's emotions.
Yeah.
And I think that's partly because it was dangerous if someone became angry or in my early years. So I've always been very attuned to it, very sensitive, just like your son. If someone in a room, I would spot them immediately. And to this day, if I'm running a workshop and I see someone looking slightly distressed, I tune into it instantly. The facial expressions, the voice tonality, posture, it's instant, and it triggers an immediate response in me. And so in a couple of ways I would deal with it. One was to become a rescuer, like, oh, how can I help? Or how can I smooth the waters? Or I'll just do whatever it takes to help you restore your balance, your homeostasis. I want to help you feel good again, even if it's at my own expense. But being absolutely hyper alert to emotions in an environment was part of the story. It was only more recently that I started thinking about, well, it's not really always my job to resolve everyone's problems. And I mean, when I say recently, a few years, I've had a good induction into the world of compassionate caring, but not actually rescuing. And so
Tough love.
Yeah, exactly. You know, everyone's got a journey, and you don't have to be the one to save everyone because you've also got a journey. So you can be a guide or a mentor perhaps, but it's not my problem to, help solve other people's traumas, really. Although that is part of my mission, is to share tools and approaches that might support you on your journey of life if it's something that you're interested in, but certainly not forcing it onto people or saying, there's only one way. There are many ways to travel, and that's for sure. But yeah, to answer the question, empathy was always both a massive strength, because it enabled me to understand what people wanted with precision and give it to them. So I would progress so fast along the corporate career, but at the same time feel that empathic distress, because I'd be unable to sleep at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Quite right.
That's so powerful. And it's interesting to hear you share that, because it's exactly been my journey. And I think that's been yours as well, Hutch.
Totally.
And I think it's one of the things I have in my program, because you naturally start out as a rescuer. I think the interesting thing is, though, that sometimes we can be so sensitive to other people's feelings, we don't even understand that they're not our feelings. So we can walk into a room where there's a really big energy, and it could be so debilitating. And that's probably what happened to you in your 20s as well, that you'd get triggered into a bad state, and it actually wasn't even your feeling that triggered you there in the first place. It can be the feelings of those strong people around you, maybe living in the same house as you or in the same part of your life. And so learning how to deal with that is a really key thing, and having really healthy boundaries and being clear about that is a key part of being able to use that high empathy in an effective way, because it can be really valuable. But it is learning to step out of rescuing, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah. And
I'd like to know more about what do you see as your mission, though, Brad? Because I sense that in different ways from different directions, I think that Sandy and I have arrived at the same place. And I'm heard just where do you see you taking this? What's your purpose in life?
Thank you for the question. I increasingly feel drawn to helping others to flourish. And whether that's through fiction, which I'm still working on, I have a novel in the works that is it's a journey of a place in time where I took the other path and what happened if I'd stayed there. And it's really beautiful and uplifting. I think kind of The Alchemist or Siddhartha, kind of that genre, magic realism. But then also at the same time, using tools, using my voice to create great conversations through my own podcast, to leave breadcrumbs for anyone who's interested. Just as I often think back, I found that book, The Buddha's Brain, at just the right time in my life. Imagine if I can leave breadcrumbs out there that can have that same effect. And I know I already have. So I've had so many people, maybe hundreds of people say, oh, what you said in that workshop was really transformative for me. It enabled me to change, or what you said in that book was really valuable. So just doing more of that, and not trying to be a do-gooder, just saying these are things that I'm fascinated by. We can actually change ourselves, and trying to ride the intersection between wisdom, philosophy, and science and technology, and see what emerges in that space, because those are my three passions. So ancient wisdom fused with behavioral science, fused with the latest in technology and AI. And that's what I'm passionate about. So seeing what I can discover there and then share the most valuable with the world.
That's great.
Wow, that's so awesome.
That is brilliant.
And like I can't help but ask more about AI, because I'm finding that those of us who are neurodiverse, we love AI. We are passionate about it. We see it as being something that's actually going to enable us to navigate the neurotypical world with a great deal of ease. How do you experience AI? I know that you're an early adopter.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's interesting. I had designed an AI chatbot in 2018. That's several years before ChatGPT came out, because I wanted, my whole life, I had wanted a companion. I'd even coded into early computers the ability to have some voice conversations. They were extremely rudimentary, but I've always fantasized about this. And then it happens. So it's an invaluable companion.
Yeah.
I always laugh when people say AI is not that powerful, it hallucinates, and all of the things that it potentially can't do. But with each iteration, it becomes more powerful. It enables you to look at situations neurotypically. That's a really powerful aspect, because I can say, this is a situation, and I use voice with it all the time. So this is a situation I've encountered. What do you think? And it will provide me with this multi-perspectival view to say, well, this is one angle, this is another, this is what a normal person would do, and here's what you might like to do. And that's really useful for brainstorming. I find that is so powerful. To help structure thoughts. It's incredible because you can just download a stream of consciousness. I'll often use another AI tool to dictate my ideas, whether it's a blog post, a YouTube script, a book idea, or just a challenge that I have in my life. So I dictate into that, copy the transcript, paste it into ChatGPT or Claude, and say, synthesize this for me. And it does a great job of summarizing language and coming up with, these are the gems, and maybe don't do that thing that you just mentioned there, but here's something to consider. So I find it's an amazing creative tool. It can really enhance your thinking. Of course, I wouldn't just blindly go create me a blog post, or because it's going to be super generic. But if it's infused with your own creativity and your own ideas, it can be an amazing tool. And we're only just getting started.
We are, aren't we? I love it. I love it. One of my favorite tools at the moment is Perplexity AI, and I think I love the name. But I can ask it to come up with a generic answer, and then I can pick some of the eyes out of that and tell it to go away and have a really deep think and come back, and it'll go off with a little wee whirly circle, and it'll come with actually some really unique takes. And but I'm excited by the AI journey. Yes, there are some hooks and threads and things that we do need to be careful of, but as we are finishing up today's time with you, which we really appreciate, is there any final thoughts? Have you got any final questions, Hutch, that you'd like to ask?
Just going back to surfing, for me, it's art, drawing. As I said before, the only two things I can do are write and draw. And the only way for me, I don't believe you can draw or create in a funk, but it's a way of releasing it from that funk. And I'd just like to know, in terms of surfing or anything athletic, anything getting out, what's your way out?
In terms of a way out, a way to bypass the resistance.
Yeah, when you're down a hole, how do you get out?
It's a good question. I focus on what it will feel like at the end of a session. And I apply this to all kinds of situations in life. So I visualization, powerful tool, in fact, because I find I can visualize in quite a lot of vivid detail. So whether it's visualizing the feeling of walking in and holding the board and the water dripping off me, and that was an incredible session. I must admit, I'm experiencing this right now, because for 6 months we've had no surf where I live, and now it's started to get good again. And in the interim, I've been going to the gym and running and doing everything else. So that's my comfort zone now, of going to the gym and working out. By the way, ChatGPT designed me the most amazing supplement stack and workout regimen. It's unbelievable. But so visualizing the sensations of what it will be like. And in fact, even just doing that right now, I feel like going, because I know that the waves are quite good at this very moment. So for me, visualization is a powerful tool just to bypass resistance to change. So for example, if I'm presenting to a huge audience, there's always the jitters, you feel the nerves, you feel the adrenaline. Just visualizing them being happy and clapping at the end and going, wow, we got so much value out of that situation. It helps me to get through that initial discomfort. Yeah. And then, of course, if the waves are good, I mean, wow, imagining being inside of a barrel, there's nothing like it. If you've ever been inside of a wave as it's curling over you, well, as the old ads by a company called Instinct used to say, only a surfer knows the feeling. It's that deep flow state that you can get in any creative activity.
Yeah. Oh, good on you.
Yeah.
I never actually experienced the joy of surfing, but I had a very fast Malibu Lilo. That was the best I could get.
Nice. Yes.
Or
Well,
like,
anything that's floating on water. I mean, they say the negative ions are a natural antidepressant if you're near ocean with breaking waves. I think there's a lot to offer by just being near water.
I agree with that. I've done a few blue water ocean races, and just sitting on the rail, on one tack for, I don't know, 5 hours or whatever it is, you almost hallucinate and you lose yourself in a very, very different place. And I know for me, my visualization is inside me. I imagine my skull as being empty, and there's a projector in the back, and it beams a picture on the front of my skull as if it was a movie screen. And so I just close my eyes and go to the movies, and I imagine what might happen that way. So I think I totally sympathize with what you do and where you go. I think that's a great lesson for anybody to be able to visualize.
Yeah. I think all three of us had that same experience, and I know my son did as well, and that I was sort of classed as a daydreamer at school. And I remember my girlfriends used to say to me at the end of every session, well, listen, you don't know what the homework is, do you? And I look at them like, there's homework?
Yeah.
But you're deep-breathing out the window the entire class. And I was off somewhere else. And in my creative brain. And I loved art and I liked writing, but I did not like the subjects that were just logical and rational and boring. And so I think that I'd really been enjoying being able to indulge that part of myself in the last few years of my career and really build that out and design myself in a different way. And I think that's the thing that we're trying to get across in this podcast series is giving people permission to do that and hearing other people's stories. Brad, it's been amazing hearing yours. There's so many more questions we could ask, but your time is precious. So thank you very, very much for sharing your story so candidly with us today.
We'll be back.
We will be back. Yeah.
I look forward to it. Thank you for having me. Thanks for listening. I really appreciate it.